Here's my deal. Okay, folks, here's my deal. I am always going to call balls and strikes. I'm always going to call balls and strikes no matter who's at bat, because that's all that matters is the balls and the strikes. What is right and what is wrong, not the person at bat. If Trump's at bat, I'm going to call balls and strikes. If the Democrats are at bat, I'm going to call balls and strikes. Okay, so this one is a ball. I'm sorry, this is not a major story. There's no evidence that Sessions is deliberately lying about meeting with the Russian ambassador for some nefarious reason. Should he recuse himself is a second question. And that second question is basically, is he so compromised at this point that any investigation he does will be compromised? That's possible. That is possible. And there are good arguments both ways. On the one hand, there's that argument. On the other hand, there's the argument that if anybody can basically be prevented from doing their job by a media and a Democratic Party that insists that every minor problem is a major problem, then nothing's ever going to get done. If you're accusing yourself over, I once met the Russian ambassador at my office, then what won't you recuse yourself over? What can you actually do? That's a serious problem for the Trump administration. It looks, in all likelihood, like Sessions will just recuse himself on this thing. That doesn't mean there will be a special prosecutor, by the way. It just means that his deputy will end up prosecuting this thing. And his deputy, presumably, would probably act the same way that he would, because his deputy will be appointed in coordination with President Trump by him. So, the idea that he is going to somehow not be able to have control over the investigation is just not true. As an example, the Deputy Attorney General for Loretta Lynch was that lady who refused to prosecute Donald Trump's executive order and ended up being fired. So the Deputy Attorney General ends up looking a lot like the Attorney General under whom they serve. But here's my bottom line. This thing looks way overblown, even for people like me who are suspicious of Donald Trump's relations with the Russians, because there's a lot of smoke, but we haven't seen any real fire yet. Even for somebody like me who looks at Paul Manafort and says, that's kind of weird, and looks at Donald Trump constantly praising Putin and says, well, that's kind of weird, and looks at the fact that Michael Flynn was so warm with Vladimir Putin, and so that's kind of weird. Even for me, this is a nothing burger of a story. And again, balls and strikes are all that matters. I'm not going to rip Trump for doing something I don't think is particularly wrong. That said, it's pretty clear that the Democrats are losing their minds, and they're particularly losing their minds over this moment with Karen Owens. And I want to talk about this briefly because we ran a story a couple of days ago in which we talked about the Democrats not standing up for Karen Owens. And people took that to mean that we were saying that they had never stood up for Karen Owens. We never claimed that they never stood up for Karen Owens. What we said, as I said on the podcast yesterday, was that the Democrats stood at the beginning and then they sat down. And then they sat down. And when people say, well, they sat down, it's not a big deal, then why is it that in all the pictures you can see that half the room is sitting and half the room is standing? If it wasn't coordinated, if it wasn't a matter of partisanship, then why is it that half the room is standing and half the room is sitting? Why wouldn't it just be a bunch of randos who are kind of standing and sitting together? Why wouldn't some Republicans have sit and some Democrats sit? Everybody just got tired and bored, and so they sat down. But that's not what it looks like. You can see the pictures. Half the room is sitting, half the room is standing during the second ovation, not the initial ovation. Everybody stands for the initial ovation. Here's what I actually wrote, okay? Democrats initially stood for the widow, but then they sat. Trump didn't. Okay, so I was very clear about this. Nonetheless, Snopes and Politifact, instead of ranking as half true or totally true the claim that Democrats sat down for the video, they said that it was completely false, which I have pictures. And so does Benny Johnson. Benny Johnson is the guy who initially reported this from IJ Review, and he tweeted out pictures of Keith Ellison and Debbie Wasserman Schultz sitting down in the middle of the second ovation. And you can see it in his picture. I mean, I'm looking at the picture right now, right before me, and he's not the only one. I mean, they're sitting down. An entire body of the Democratic Party is sitting down. Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi, by the end, are sitting down, which is exactly what we wrote in the piece. But again, PolitiFact and Snopes and the rest of these fact checkers are lefties, and so they feel the need to overreach because they're desperate to disprove the idea that Democrats made a boo-boo by not standing up the whole time, which they obviously should have. Okay, that's just one indicator of how the Democrats are overplaying their hand, but they're losing their minds in general because anytime Trump does something good and isn't a universal crap show, they begin to go crazy. So Michael Moore, again, going off on this whole Karen Owens thing, he's suggesting that Donald Trump used the SEAL widow. So here's what he had to say.
Of course, and that's why she's there as a sort of a FU to the people who are criticizing him for this. And this poor woman, this widow who has lost her husband, she is in desperate grief right now.
She's in love with her husband still.
And in love with her husband.
And what did you think of that?
And to use that as just put another notch on his belt. And what's he thinking about? My ratings.
Okay, and so Moore is very upset. Okay, as I said yesterday, two things can be true at once. One can be that Trump wanted to honor her. The second can be that Donald Trump was using her as a political prop. Okay, I'm just going to be perfectly frank about this. Politicians use people as political props all the time. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton stood in front of the flag-draped coffins from Benghazi and lied to the families of Benghazi for political gain. Barack Obama in 2014 invited a wounded warrior to the State of the Union. Did he do so because he was so respectful of the troops, or did he do so as a political prop? And the answer is maybe both, right? It can be both. You know, Barack Obama, he did the same, he's done the same routine multiple times. Hillary Clinton trotted out Kaiser Khan, right? Gold Star family, and this became a major issue in the campaign. She trotted out Kaiser Khan to rip into Donald Trump over Kaiser Khan's son being killed in Iraq, right? And Kaiser Khan rips into Trump. Was that Hillary Clinton using them as a prop? It's really funny. Every time somebody on the right brings out a family member of somebody who's been slain in the line of duty, then they're a political prop according to the Democrats. So when Republicans talked about Pat Smith, who's the mother of Sean Smith, who was killed in Benghazi, then she was just a political prop. But every time the Democrats tried out a Cindy Sheehan, or every time they tried out the Jersey Girls, you know, from 9/11, these are heroes who cannot be questioned under any circumstances. Here is the reality. Politicians will always use people who are suffering. They'll always use victims as a little bit of political theater. They'll always do that. That doesn't change the fact that this woman wanted to be there. And I thought Mary Catherine Ham of CNN had the exact right take on this, which was, you know, Ryan Owens' widow, Karen Owens, she has every right to be there. She has every right to feel the applause of the entire nation shower down upon her in thanks. And one day she'll be able to show her kids the tape of when their father was cheered by the entire nation at a State of the Union address. So, you know, the Democrats are losing their minds over this. Jake Tapper at CNN, whose reporting I generally like, he also went after Trump because Trump at one point apparently had said about the Yemen raid, they lost Ryan, and meaning the military, meaning the generals. And Jake Tapper objected to this, meaning you authorized the raid. Why don't you say we lost Ryan? Why do you make it about they? It's nitpicky.
They lost Ryan. Quote, they lost Ryan. But they didn't lose him. We did. We all did as a nation. And one might think that the commander-in-chief who signed off on that raid would also think in terms of we lost Ryan. Accountability and responsibility, these are important principles.
Okay, so, you know, this is a little bit of an overstate by Tapper. You know, let's see what comes out about this Yemen raid, whether there was actual intelligence gathered. There's a lot of controversy over that. But, you know, trying to say that Trump is somehow disrespecting the memory of this guy, I think that's an overstatement. Mike Pence, I think, hits this right on the head. He says all of this is a great disservice to the family.
Does that make you angry? You seem like a calm guy. That made me angry. And then make you angry?
It does a great disservice to a great American family.
And I think that that's totally fair. I mean, ripping her, and there are people who ripped her, saying that she was used and she allowed herself to be used. Again, it's her choice to be there. If you're going to rip Trump for using her, then you have to show that he used her and didn't honor her, and I'm not sure that happened. I think that's, again, a wild overstatement by desperate Democrats.